At the last recording, before we went into the weekend, we went over how the sales conversation has to be question led and is not a talking led process and is not a toasting process, and how that is good news because it's not a matter of sheer talent or good looks or disposition or personality, but it's about learnable skills. Because asking questions is something that anybody can get good at. Asking questions is a skill. It's something that you can learn and you can get good at over time. So, that was the last recording pretty much, or rather the second to the last recording before the rant where I dropped some of that gospel. Now, before we continue with today's recording and how that ties in with the topic for today, I have noticed from the stats that listenership is increasing and we're getting more subscriptions. And I'd like to say welcome to those of you who subscribe to the podcast, who have joined the family over the weekend. I don't often see bumps like this, so it's usually a very good thing when I make the last recording on a Friday and then I sign off for the weekend and then come back on a Monday and see that we've gotten some new listeners. So, welcome to the tribe. Unfortunately, the data analytics on podcasting is really poor. So whenever someone subscribes, I can't see who you are, where you're listening from, and episodes that you've listened to the most and stuff like that. And it's such a shame because I would like to welcome each of you individually as you join the podcast. At least now in the early days of the podcast, we've been going at this for over a year and a half. So now in these early days that listenership is growing in single digits, it's nice, to see, 2-3 people join, stuff like that. So at this early stage where I can, it'd be nice if I could to shout you guys out. Because a time will come, of course, when listenership will grow by the thousands, and at that stage, it pretty much would be difficult to acknowledge every single person. So, for those of you who joined over the weekend, you know who you are. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for your time and attention. And I'll do my best over here on the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast to keep dishing out business savvy and business tips and tricks. Of course, always coming at it from the angle of personal sales and how we can grow our businesses one conversation at a time. So, thank you very much for signing up. Now, today, continuing on the whole thing about sales and being question-led. Now, one benefit of focusing on the questions that you ask your customers or your prospective customers is that if you ask the right kinds of questions to customers and clients, you're going to be able to get insights. You're going to be able to get some data that will help you improve your business, improve your business delivery, or will help you change the very nature of your product or service itself. Because there have been people in other industries who have started off doing one thing, and then based on the reactions that they get from customers, they realize that they ought to be in another line of business, and then they switch into something which is much more commercially viable. And so those of us in the wedding and event space, we can also avail ourselves of this kind of dynamic. And that's one of the reasons why we should always be asking our prospective clients and customers questions and thinking about the right kinds of questions to ask them. So I'm sure by now, those of you who are long-time listeners of the podcast are already familiar with the kind of questions that we ask beforehand, especially those of you who are wedding planners, because you can't deliver a quote without asking questions anyway. So you guys ask the typical questions. You say congratulations. Who are you? Are you the bride or the sister of the bride? Is the wedding day fixed? What's the venue? What budget are you guys looking at? What's the plan for the day? What's the perfect vision of the day? And all that nice jazz. All those questions that we ask in the beginning. And we have also done several episodes, and we'll still continue to do several episodes about questions that you ask after the sale. We hope you guys are happy. We hope we resolve this particular thing to your liking. What did you like? What do you think we can improve on? Things like that. So I think today it's more of those kinds of questions that we ask after the sale, after we're done with the wedding, after we're done with delivering the product or the service. So those kinds of questions that we do after the sale, that we do in relationship building, those are the kind of questions that I'm talking about that are going to be useful to give you insights that will help you improve your business. Now, for instance, when I first started this off back when I was in Lagos, I assumed that my chief benefit, I assumed that my unique selling proposition, my USP, as we like to say, was that I am good at candid photography and I don't do Photoshop. And so a lot of my sales process was built around that. Me talking about, candid photography, documentary photography, not editing in Photoshop, not being heavy-handed, and all of that. But having had lots of debrief conversations over the years, I've come to find that even though these are important parts about how I shoot, the fact that I keep it candid, I'm flowing with the action on the day, and I'm not heavy handed when it comes to editing. In fact, I don't do any editing. I realized that a lot of things that my customers and the people who give repeat business to me, what they seem to find more useful are the other intangible stuff. Stuff about me being much more professional than the other guys, or I'm nicer, or whatever it is, all the intangible stuff. And I've admitted over on the podcast, I've admitted to my wife and a couple of other people in conversation that at first actually used to hurt because we wedding photographers, we are passionate artist kind of types, and so the kind of feedback we want to hear is that, oh, your photographs are absolutely amazing, this, that. We want it to be all about us and the images, and we want to get that big head moment. So in the beginning, it used to hurt that I would hear all the intangibles like, oh, you're really professional. And yeah, I like hearing that I was professional, but I mean, what does that have to do with my beautiful candid photographs? Or the things that, oh, I'm always on time, and that I deliver when I say I'll deliver. And so in the beginning that used to hurt, but I guess my wife, Patience, helped me see the brighter side of things. That, well, she helped me see the brighter side of things, that if this is the feedback that I'm getting, then that is actually how I should start building my sales process around these things, because that is actually my real USP. And so that is one thing that has changed about how I market myself and my services, and how I talk about the quality of the service that I provide. So a lot of times I now spend on the intangibles rather than the whole thing about being candid, documentary, editing, blah, blah, blah. And all those things which, quite frankly, the average customer does not understand. So the average bride doesn't know the difference between, she hears posed and she kind of knows what that means. And she hears candid and maybe she has an idea, but does candid mean not posed? Does documentary mean, they just don't have an idea of what these things mean. So for me, that's a specific example about how the questions that I have asked after delivery of the service, and in trying to assess my clients' needs, and in relationship building, this is how it has changed the way that I market myself and my service over the years. So your own experience might be different, because I know a cake person who, for her, it was all about the taste of the cakes, like her cakes are the best tasting, blah 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 blah, all that jazz. But then it turns out that her USP, her unique selling proposition, or what people really like about doing business with her, is that she delivers non-traditional cakes. So she's put up a video. She's put up a video recently on her YouTube of a cake that she made that looks like roasted corn. So she's done the roasted corn cake, the turntables, DJ turntables, what else? So basically, she thought the sweetness of my cakes, my cakes are delicious. My ingredients, blah blah blah, stuck in the whole artistry, just like I was. But it turns out that her unique selling proposition and the things that people like, just that she gets she's capable of doing the unique cakes. So if you want a golf themed cake, golf course with clubs or whatever, you call her. If you want stuff, other kinds of things, you call other people. So So for two of us in particular, and for others, if you start adopting this question-based approach, you will find that that's a useful benefit. That when you start asking these kinds of questions, you realize that you've been selling the wrong thing all the time. That you've been going around saying, "I'm the best at documentary photography," but really, what people value about you is your professionalism, your manner, your delivery, and your likability. Or you're running around saying that I have the best tasting cakes on the planet, but really, what people like about you is the artistry with your cakes, your creative ideas, your finish, the flourishing on the cakes, and stuff like that. So, if you're not bought over yet, if you haven't been convinced, this is also one of the reasons why you should come over to the question based approach of developing your sales rather than the toasting approach. Because if you go on toasting and focusing on how, if you keep on toasting and you're focusing on being braggadocious, you'll go on just like I was talking about candid photography, documentary photography, non-destructive editing, and stuff that people don't understand, and you're just talking over your customers' heads. Or you could get straight to the root of the matter and start talking about the things that your customers actually care about. So, we're past the 10-minute mark, and so I'll wrap it up here. Again, thank you very much to those of you guys who joined over the weekend. I hope you guys find useful tips, tricks, and commentary over here. And please remember to share. It's nice that you subscribe, but remember to share the podcast so other people can find out about the gospel that we preach over here on the podcast. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I also like to shout out Rodney Avo. That's the Young God. I think his podcast is the Young God Pod. He's an Abuja-based photographer as well, who has a podcast, and he's one of the people who encouraged me to start off the podcast. He's been saying so for maybe a year and a half before I actually started doing this in February, just before the lockdowns last year. So his podcast is more gist-based. He's interviewed lots of Big Brother winners and runner-ups and actresses and models and influencers and stuff like that. So it's an interesting gist podcast. He's having his podcast listening party this Saturday. Gosh, I can't remember the address. I should have written down all these details. Anyway, he's going to have his podcast listening party this Saturday. It's to launch season 5 of his podcast, the Young God Pod. And the idea behind it is kind of like a just riffing off of the thing that people used to do in the music industry back in the day, where you would have an album launch party and people would come and listen to the new tracks, and you just catch some vibes and be cool together. So shout out to Rodney Avo, the Young God Pod. If that's your sort of thing, if you like those kind of podcasts, then when you're done with this, use the search function in whatever podcast catcher that you listen to. Look for the Young God Pod so you can catch interesting, more, I was going to say lighthearted, because, well, anyway, it's not lighthearted because, yes, you usually start off lighthearted, but then quickly you delve into serious issues. So if you want a different take on podcasting and you're trying to spice things up, you're tired of listening to business podcasts or politics or news-based podcasts all the time, this will be a new way to break the monotony. So, yeah, that's it. So thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'll catch you at the next recording.